welcome to Beauty in the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, I'm very excited about today's guest. It's Dr. Alexander Rifkin of the Rivkin Aesthetics in Los Angeles. Now, since 2003, he has specialized in state-of-the-art, non-surgical aesthetic procedures that compete with the outcomes of plastic surgery, delivered in an intimate and luxurious setting. So Dr. Rifkin received his BA from Columbia University and his MD from Yale University School of Medicine. Now, he completed his internship in general surgery from the University of California, San Diego, as well as his residency in otolaryngology and head and neck surgery. Now, Dr. Rifkin is also assistant clinical professor at the UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine. He also conducts lots of clinical trials. He publishes a lot, and he serves on several pharma advisory boards. Now, Dr. Rifkin also is involved in several philanthropic efforts, one of which is spearheading aid to help war-torn Ukraine, and we're going to talk more about that. So, Dr. Rifkin, welcome to Beauty in the Biz.
Thanks. Really appreciate being here. It's an honor.
Thank you. So I always like to start out with, what was your journey, because it's never a straight line, from academia into private practice? Just a quick, concise journey.
Oh, gosh, for me, there wasn't much of a journey. When I got after training, I knew that I wanted to open up my own place, and I wanted to be my own boss. And so my journey was actually less from academia to private practice and more from private practice to a little bit of academia. Oh. So once I established myself in my practice, it was at that point then that my practice is a stone's throw away from UCLA. And at that point, I reached out to UCLA and became involved with the medical school. So yeah, so for me, it was that. And then we started doing, publishing, started teaching and all this kind of stuff. But first thing I did is establish a practice in a very, very small place. So
you went out on your own right away, but in a very competitive arena.
Well, the interesting thing is that, and it's funny because people talk about how timing is everything, and timing was really everything in my case. I was very, very fortunate because it's a competitive arena, but at the time when I started, which was like 2003, 2004, our field was just starting. There was clearly this was going to explode in my mind. There was no question about that because the demand was the demand was obvious, and the ability of non-surgical treatments to achieve the goals of patients was indisputable. And so I thought, well, you have these products that work, you have patients that want this, and that, such an enormous population that wants this. There's no way this is not going to become huge. And so it was clear that this was going to be a big thing. And so kind of jumped on it. And so from that standpoint, there wasn't a lot of people who were specializing specifically in non-surgical aesthetic treatments, right? Some people were doing this and plastic surgery or doing this in dermatology. But then, so I was one of the first around that I knew of. I didn't know anybody else who specialized, who did this 100% from the beginning. And from that point, so from that standpoint, it was not that difficult because my competition really wasn't very strong. Like there wasn't anybody who had a good website at the time. Like nobody had any. And I was like, okay, well, clearly people, when they look for this kind of treatment, the information bottleneck here is obviously Google. And that was clear in 2004. And so if you can control Google, if you can control your rankings, you're suddenly the premier practice, no matter what, no matter that you've been open for 6 months, doesn't matter. And so from that standpoint, there wasn't a ton of the competition. Now I think it would be more difficult to open a place. It's tough because everybody's learned those lessons now.
For sure. I got into this industry in year 2000 because I was all about injectables and lasers. So I happened to go to a dermatologist who was a very well-known cosmetic dermatologist, and she did specialize in cosmetic. And I remember how awful the service was. Like, I was one of 40 patients she saw. I mean, it was just a joke. I remember thinking, this industry is going to need a lot of help when it comes to marketing, customer service, understanding the patient with a credit card versus an insurance card. And that's exactly why I got into it. And what's funny is nobody was doing the plastic surgeons were not doing the injectables. They didn't want to. They wanted to do the surgery. And there were just a few doing the non-surgical. So I thought, that's interesting. And now it's really turned on its head.
Yeah.
So do you still do surgery or no?
No, I haven't for a very long time. I haven't for a long time because it seemed to be too big of an opportunity to pass up. I'd rather, and to me, and it's funny because there's different kinds of people, right? There's people who get a kick out of breadth, like, oh, I can do anything. And then there's people who get a kick out of depth, where I'm the best in the world at this very specific, very narrow thing. I'm the second category. I didn't know this about myself, but now now it's pretty clear. I'm in the second category where I just want to be, I just want to be the best in one specific narrow thing and have my niche that I'm just kind of that's what I dominate, and that's what I like to have. And then I refer to other people for other things, and then other people refer to me for for my thing. And to me, that works nicely because then I'm not stepping on anybody's toes. I'm friendly with everybody because everybody wants to be my friend, because then I send people out, and I want to be everybody else's friend because they send people in. It's great. It's all kind of kumbaya, and everybody lives happily ever after. I like that.
Good for you.
So that's what I've been doing. So that's why I didn't want to be kind of, oh, I can do anything. I'm like, I'm God. I can't do everything. But I can certainly do the nose better than most people. And I find that to be very satisfying.
I read somewhere that you were the innovator of the non-surgical nose job. Is that true?
I mean, I'm not, it seems, I don't know. I mean, I had not heard of anybody doing this. So in 2004, when I did this, I had not heard of anybody doing this before. And I looked on, on Medline. I had not heard of anybody doing this procedure. And now, of course, most likely all these kinds of fillers were available in Asia before they were available here. So I'm sure there's people that were doing it in China, but not anybody that I knew around here. So when I kind of figured out the procedure, and I went to media with it, they were like, they're like, wow, we've never heard of this. This is completely new. And I figured, okay, well, that's a good indication that, this is not something that people, because as soon as I started doing this, I'm like, I realized that this is truly something fairly innovative, because this was something where the only way to change the contours of the nose before this procedure was through surgery. And I realized this is the first option, this first alternative that people really had to surgery. And so if this had been around, if people had been doing this before, I think it would have been all over the place. Like, people would have spoken about it, media would have, kind of gobbled it up. Wasn't the case. When I went to media, they were like, we'd never heard of this. This is amazing. The possibility for this, they recognized right away. And it was great.
So do you have patients that are so keen on non-surgical that you do it, and then do they come back again and again, year after year? Although, having said that, I realize you also do a permanent non-surgical nose job. What the heck is that?
Yeah. So I think, It's an interesting. So okay, so the two kind of components to that question. So with the nose, specifically talking about the nose, some people do choose to come back a few times for temporary non-surgical rhinoplasty using, HA fillers like Voluma or Lift or any of these kinds of things. That's okay because I use very tiny amounts, and so it's not like I'm shoving a whole bunch of filler into underneath the skin and then building upon it and making the nose into like changing the contours of the nose in a significant way. I'm doing very subtle contour adjustments using fillers, and so if you do it a few times, you got to you wait until like the material. We wait until the material mostly goes away and then add to it, and that's fine. But what I use now more often, what I do is switch from temporary to permanent filler. And there's a permanent filler called Belfill that is very nice. People are freaked out by permanent fillers because of the history that these fillers have had in Europe and Asia, and like fillers that weren't very well, the ingredients weren't very good. There were side effects that were pretty bad. And so people are afraid of putting something under the skin that, potentially years later can have some sort of problems. I've been using this particular filler. There's only one, there's only one filler that's FDA approved that's permanent, which is methyl methacrylate, which is Belfill. There's some people that use silicone, and I'm a little scared of silicone because I don't, I've seen other things, but it seems that with the right technique, you can use silicone effectively. I don't love silicone in general because it's very, very liquidy. And for something like the nose, I want structure and I want lift to the tissue. But I've been using Belfill for over a decade, and I've honestly had more problems with hyaluronic acid fillers than I have with Belfill. It's been a remarkably safe filler for me.
And when they say permanent, don't they mean like 5 years or something?
No, the studies have gone out to 5 years, so they can only say 5 years because that's how long the follow-up is for the studies. But methyl methacrylate, we know as a material, is not something that's dissolved by the body. And so it's a inert plastic that we use in other, in ophthalmology and other surgery that sticks around. So I know that the material is not going to go anywhere, but the way that the filler works, unlike other fillers, the way this filler works is as a collagen stimulant, as a very specific collagen stimulant. So it's little tiny granules of methyl methacrylate, and then collagen builds up around that. So the grape seed and then the grape comes around that. The material lasts forever under the skin, but your reaction to it is different as time goes on. So as we get older, we know, unfortunately, we don't stimulate as much collagen growth, right? And so the effect, the aesthetic effect, may change over time. Additionally, because the underlying tissues, as we age, shrink, right? And so we get bone loss, we get cartilage loss and fat loss and all that kind of stuff. So we change. It's permanent, but we're not. And so after 7 years or so, sometimes people need a little touch-up. But the material is great.
Gotcha.
And I've done that before. When people come back like 8 years later, 10 years later even, and do a little touch-up and they finally go away, they don't come back.
So I also noticed you have like every laser on the planet. And I would like to discuss that because I do consulting and everyone's got a laser that they regretted buying. And I wish they had called me ahead of time because it didn't fit into their marketing plan, their demographics. They were going to have to open up a whole new marketing plan to cater to that new market. So any tips and strategies on buying lasers and actually making them profitable?
Short of don't. that may not be some of my advice, but I guess as physicians, we have a certain relationship to reps. So drug reps, and mostly we deal with drug reps. And with drug reps, there is a certain amount of we know to take the information that they present to us in a somewhat skeptical manner, but yet we know that they're telling us it may be they may be spinning it a little bit, but they're fundamentally they're telling us the truth. Drug reps. So whether it's for drugs in the hospital that we use for sick people, or it's Botox, Dysport, stuff like that. I mean, there's spin, there's angles and all that kind of stuff, but they're mostly fundamentally functional. That is not the case with laser reps, as I have learned in the hard way, the really hard way. It's just, so my advice to people is don't listen to a word that any laser rep has to say about anything. I think that the information that they present is I've really been I've been fooled, and I've been fooled, and I have a bunch of very expensive coat hangers, like door stops lying around my office, and I really there's certain companies that are considerably more aggressive than others in terms of I signed there's one company, and I can say the name or not say the name. Don't say the name. But anyways, there's one company that shall remain nameless, where the guy like wanted me. He went to my house at like 8 p.m. to sign paperwork.
Wow.
This dude practically sat on my head in order to get me to sign these paperwork.
Well, he had a quota.
Boy, did he have a quota. And then, it was a big mistake. So I think that you really have to understand, you really have to have a realistic understanding of what your practice is, who your practice attracts, what those patients want, and what those patients can afford before you make the judgment to plunk down a whole bunch of money for an expensive machine. And I think this is I think a big part of your consultation, the value of your consultation to these practices, because people just don't understand that. These guys come in with their shiny little, graphs saying like, look, doc, you'll make your money back in in 2 weeks. It'll be awesome. This is going to be the easiest thing in the world. And then 3 years later, you're sitting there with a machine that nobody uses because you didn't realize that that's just not the demographic of your population.
Well, I would certainly survey my patients before I buy the thing, because the reps will look at it from their own perspective. Like, we're going to attract new patients for you. But the machine's not going to attract new patients unless you know how to market the darn thing. But you have to first make sure your patient demand is there. Like, it's internally already there organically, so you can feed off of that. Otherwise, those payments start racking up immediately, and you didn't get the 5 new patients a month to pay for that payment, like you said. And it gets to be a real challenge.
And I would say, in addition to that, and I'm sorry to sound kind of like, to sound like the laser reps or the devil incarnate, but they do funky stuff. There has been known some of them have been known to generate calls to people's offices of not true patients inquiring about a particular laser that they then, so they have a bunch of people call the office inquiring about some, whatever laser that is. Then you think, oh my God, this laser is in big demand. And then suddenly they pop up and you're like, hey, you want this laser? And you're like, yeah, they've got big demand.
Right.
It's really important to do your actual survey and really don't cut corners.
Well, it's been very well known that if you can if you tell the surgeon or the doctor, the staff says, oh my God, we got, a call about this laser. All they need are about 4 of those calls. And the surgeon says, I'm in, obviously. But what I would suggest is go ahead and survey. It's so easy nowadays to survey your patient list. You can do it with, SurveyMonkey. You can do it on Instagram. You can literally get on there and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this laser. What do you think? I would really look at your patients, not the sales reps.
Absolutely. Data, there's these days getting data, gathering data and analyzing data for about all sorts of kind of aspects of your practice is so easy. There's no excuse not to do it. And it's the only way to be a good business person because we run businesses. You got to gather the analytics.
Otherwise, you can't make a good decision without your numbers. I am so surprised at how many make decisions based off of anecdotal evidence. Whatever this, I'll say to a surgeon like, what's your top procedure? And they'll look at the staff. What's our top procedure? And they all have a little discussion about it. And I said, no, you guys, come on. I want to see the numbers,
Yeah, it's true.
So looking at your practice, it looks to me like I'm trying to figure out how you have positioned yourself. And I would say you're like the Ritz of the med spas because you're not fooling around with like estheticians. You've got serious NPs, PAs, RNs, and you, the cosmetic surgeon. So was that done on purpose, or why such high level revenue generators working with you?
I think what I want to, you kind of make a choice at some point. And this is something I would go back and forth about in various kind of ways. Like, well, do I want to open a satellite place in Redondo Beach with a storefront? Do I want to do that? Do I want to be doing walk-ins and stuff like that? I guess you kind of make a choice as to what kind of clientele you want to attract, right? And I guess part of that choice is what you're comfortable with in terms of marketing, how you market, and how, first of all, how confident you are in marketing and figuring out how to market effectively, and A, and B, what kinds of marketing are you comfortable with, right? And so I felt at the time that when I started the practice and early on the practice, that the internet was like, okay, I'll tell you an example. I went to this conference locally, and I had a guy, and I was listening to all these guys stand up and speak, and I was just in the audience.
Were they surgeons or were they marketers?
Surgeons. They were all surgeons. And they were speaking about, and there's one guy that came up to speak about marketing your practice. And this is a guy who was legendary. I mean, he has surgical stuff named after him, and all, etc. So he's been around for a very long time. He came up and he said, newspapers were great for me at starting out. Newspapers are great for me mid-career. Newspapers are great for me now. I see no reason to change direction. I think the internet is a fluke and it's, whatever. And I looked at that and I heard that and I said, I'm going to all in on the internet because these guys just don't get it. They don't understand what's going on in the world today. And so that's why I thought, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to attract my patients online. I don't need a storefront. I'm going to provide them with an experience that they've never seen before. My patients, I'm going to provide them an experience they've never seen before in a physician's office. And so I'm going to eliminate the glass in the counter. I'm going to have an open kind of,
sliding window that you have to knock on.
Yeah, none of that crap. And so I'm going to make them feel like they're in a luxurious place. So to do that, you have to control. And again, this is kind of like, I don't know, I guess I grew up, my mom was a facialist. So she had her own salon in Boston, right? Okay. And so I grew up telling my mom how she was dumb and she needed to do all these kinds of things to make her salon better. And she said, she's like, what do you know? You're just a silly teenager. Go do your math homework, right? And so now I get a chance to actually execute what I've been thinking about for a while. So I felt like I could do that where I could present a luxury experience where I would control every aspect of the patient's experience at when they walk through the door. So where they sat, what they saw, what they smelled, what they felt, how, what the interaction was with the front desk, all that stuff, I was prepared to hypermanage in order to make a good experience. And I think that worked. And so from that standpoint, I had estheticians. I started with estheticians and nurses and me as an injector, but I now don't do I have a little bit of esthetician stuff, but really very, very minimal, because it's just the real estate of the rooms I need for more, as a business, you count on what's the profit per hour per square foot, and it just estheticians just don't make any sense.
So you didn't just go to RNs. You also jumped up to NPs and PAs. So is there a strategy for why you're using such high level people to run lasers and do injectables, or is there a reason for that?
In California, PAs and NPs can do their own good faith exams. So that's helpful, so that so I don't have to see all the new patients. So that's nice. To my mind, that's the only advantage between an NP, a PA, or an RN. I've seen excellent injectors in all three categories. So I would never say that one is better than the other. And I try to choose people that, it used to be that I chose people that are experienced only, because I didn't want to train them. I've backed off of that, and I actually would rather, because again, I've brought in people who were experienced, but who didn't understand my way of doing things. And not that my way is necessarily the best way, but they had bad habits. And it's hard to untrain bad habits. So now what I choose is more likely just people who over time, I can kind of recognize who are the people that are the go-getters, who are the people who want to invest energy and time into their own development, into becoming the best they could possibly be, who are hungry for really just the next thing, like achieving the next, like who want to be excellent injectors, who want to be teachers, who want to be leaders, who want to be who are excited about this stuff, versus the people who kind of come into the practice and just want to be fed patients and then clock in and clock out. I don't want any of those people, Do
you encourage your, I'll call them ancillary staff, do you encourage them to build a following, like let's say on Instagram, on their own Instagram? How are you working that out? Because sometimes it goes the other way. You have these people with great drive, and they stick around long enough to learn, really good business sense from you, really good injection techniques from you, and then they go off on their own, and so.
I know. And that's happened to me. It's true. And that certainly has happened to me. But not a ton. But it certainly has happened to me. And I think the benefits outweigh the risks, I think, overall, for me anyways, because I just present them with a working environment that's really pretty, I think is pretty awesome. I present them with a working environment that's very low key, that's very much drama free, where everybody gets along, where I don't yell at anybody. I don't, I'm a calm guy. They get, we get them lunch, very, very often. We hang out, and we're just good to each other. And if we hire someone who doesn't fit in, they don't stick around. So we take great pains to create an atmosphere in here that's very, very pleasant to work in. And so I think it's not, so I think it's worth it. And I think it's worth it for them to develop their own Instagram and develop their own following, because it also makes them be invested in their own practice, and I think that's really important. And I think it's a motivational thing. And it helps. It helps the overall practice as well. So I think overall, I think that's really good. I think one thing I'm seeing in the industry, which is not so great, is that, social media has created some of the injectors around are really very prominent in social media. And some of the younger injectors who are very ambitious see that and they're like, well, that should be me. I want to be just like that. And they think it's easy. I'm good friends with Nicola Lowry, and I talked to her and I'm like, everybody wants to be you. And she's like, they do not understand what it means to be doing this kind of thing, how much work goes into, that social media aspect. She works and then she works again. She's got 2 jobs because it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication to do that social media thing. But the thing is that there's some companies that are taking advantage of this desire for NPs and PAs to be independent and presenting them. So I've had one, for example, who was she was poached for me by one of these kinds of organizations. They're like, oh, we'll set you up. We'll have a doc. We'll have this, we'll have this doc back you up if you need it. And we'll set you up in a place. We'll take care of everything. Here's the benchmarks, what you're going to hit. Here's what you're going to get. And they're like, and they're Google-eyed over the numbers because they're like, because, and I think overall they lose because they overestimate how much they can hit those benchmarks. And then they don't hit the benchmarks. They don't make that percent. And they're in a room in a hair salon somewhere, doing injectables. I mean, they're on their own, but I don't know. So I see a lot of that. And I see a lot of my colleagues losing good injectors to that kind of situation. I think that's unfortunate because I think everybody loses then, the injectors.
Well, those franchises or whatever those businesses are, they're promising the freedom that everybody wants and the unlimited opportunity. What they miss is who's bringing in these patients,
Right.
because they say, oh, we'll take care of the admin. We'll take care of all the paperwork. Don't worry about any of that. Yeah. Well, my first question is who's doing the marketing? Who's bringing everyone in? And they all look at me because I've had it a lot over here too. My own injector went out on her own. And I said, where are the patients coming from? And she looked at me and she said, well, I assume my patients are going to follow me. And I said, well, are you sure all of them are? Because it's never going to be what you think it's going to be.
Never.
And she literally, I just talked to her yesterday and she said, I'm going to have to hustle. And I thought, yeah, when did you think about that? So that's, oh boy, I don't know about that business model because it always looks better on the other side, but nobody can see the inside. What do they say? Don't compare your outsides with someone else's insides or however that goes. It's just there's everything that looks easy. There's a whole bunch of work that went behind that to make that look easy,
I think that's very true.
Yeah, but I love the idea of how you're going to scale, and that's how you scale. You have NPs or PAs who can see the patients for you, so that's brilliant. That would make sense to me.
I would much rather and this is what I've always thought. And after only a few years of doing this, my thought was that I would like to be. I want to be a brand, and I'm my own brand, and that's fine. But I want to be a brand of brands. I want to have a practice under my umbrella where there's independent brands that do well. And so people know my overarching brand, but they come for this specific injector because that's who they bond with. Because I don't know. I was always skeptical of the whole thing about people coming for, to a particular, I guess there's certain patients that will come to a business for their, injectables or, or laser services or whatever it is. Right. But that's not the patients I want. Right. The patients I want, they go to providers, they go to specific people. They make that connection, not to the business. They make the connection to the person. And a person could be a brand, but it's a specific person. So I like that.
and they'll pay more for it, because I don't need to shop around looking to save $100. I need to make sure my Botox is right.
Yeah.
It kicks in when it's supposed to. I need to know that you're not going to screw up my filler, and I'm left with modules, like all of that. And I want them to know who I am, what I like. Like, we women especially, we don't change our hairstylists like ever. Then same thing with our injectors. We don't change any of this if we don't have to. We've got our service providers that we count on, we trust, we like, they like us. It's all good. It's just a really efficient way, especially if if you do have money. Typically you're working a lot, or you just live a busy life, and you don't need to shop around. I'm a firm believer in what you're doing there. Like, build that brand and the right people will come.
Yeah, I think that's super important, because the other thing is you have to think about, you think about what are you earning per unit time. I'd rather have the kinds of patients where I can be efficient in my profit per unit time. I don't want to see 30 patients in a day. I'm gonna drop dead. Like, I got 2 kids at home. I can't handle that. I want to see a small amount of patients where it's manageable and my time is compensated where it's worth it, so I don't have to hustle.
So what I'm hearing is, you want to build a brand, but then build like sub departments under that umbrella. Or does that also mean you're coming up with your prototype practice and then you're going to franchise it or move it out to the various different locations?
Oh, no, maybe both. Kind of, maybe both. I haven't had other certainly the first, certainly a brand and then sub brands underneath, for sure. And the thing is that the way that works is that we help those sub brands market, because they market also, because the brand, our Instagram account is a bigger account. And so we can help market their, each provider's sub brands through that Instagram account and TikTok and whatever it is. And so that works for everybody involved. But yeah, I haven't. It is my goal to open a couple of satellite places. I've started with Beverly Hills, where we have a small office, and that's working okay. But everybody wants that 90210 zip code.
Yes, they do. Could you have picked a more competitive neighborhood?
But I think it's why I went there, actually, because my friends are over there. Okay. And I'm like, I never have lunch with Ben Tilley. I never have lunch with some of these guys. I want to do this. So I'll go over there, and I'm thinking, great, now I'm there. I can have lunch with Ben and other people. And I call them up, and they're like, dude, what are you talking about? We don't eat lunch. We operate through lunch.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of surgery. But still, at least you're setting yourself up to have endless opportunities, because this can go all sorts of different ways. But let me ask you this. What has been the most challenging part of being in private practice that maybe threw you off or could throw others off? Like, what's been most challenging?
There's only one answer to that question.
No.
Only one, ever. And anybody that thinks there's any other answer to that question has not been in this long enough and does not have the experience. And that answer is staffing. Always, always, always. It's HR. It's finding the right person for a variety of positions. And the most challenging one, by far, to me, has been finding the right person at the helm of the practice. That is that you choose the wrong person and the practice stagnates. And it's and I've chosen a lot. Let's just say I've chosen a lot of wrong people for that position. And
is the position like your right-hand man, or is it the COO, or what is that position in your perspective?
Yeah, it's the COO and my right-hand person. So this is the person that runs everything in the practice, and organizes everything and does. Yeah, this is the person that analyzes, that crunches numbers, that figure out, just understands where's the practice going, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, where do we pivot to, what kinds of marketing efforts works, what kind of doesn't. Somebody like that, it's a sophisticated position. It's a position that demands a sophisticated person with an understanding of a variety of different things: marketing, operations, staff, staff relation, everything. That's really hard to find. And I've not only has the practice stagnated and hasn't grown under the leadership of the wrong person in my experience, but it's driven me crazy because I'll go home and I'll be like, just things aren't getting done. It's just I say let's do this. Everybody's this person says yes, okay, let's do it, and then they just count on me forgetting, me getting busy and me forgetting. And then when I say, what about this? There's all these excuses that come up. And so that's really, I think that's really hard, is picking the right people for these positions and understanding just how now. So now I have someone who's really quite good. I mean, it's immense. I mean, my practice profits, and I mean, here's how immense it is. My practice profits since hiring this person over the last year, I would say, have quadrupled.
Oh my God.
Quadrupled.
Because what are they doing differently that wasn't being done?
Because they suddenly they've managed salaries. They've brought staff salaries under control, bonuses, and because I was, I can't. I'm not a micromanaging kind of guy. I'm not a detail kind of person from that standpoint. And so I just kind of like promise things here and there, and I set up systems that then kind of build upon themselves and feed and bite into the bottom line. And and this person has controlled expenses from like the overhead of the practice in a massive way. So it's been, it's been by far the best decision I've ever made in the practice.
Wow. Now, did they take away perks that were already out there? Because that can be deadly.
No, they didn't. That's something for morale that I'm not kind of, I would never want to do. I think they just kind of brought things under control that were not, that were just unreasonable. Like there's a certain there's a certain bonus structure that was kind of loosey-goosey, and but the majority of it was really, there's less staff, there was less salary control. That's kind of, there was something to that, but it wasn't huge. The majority of it was overhead and renegotiating the kinds of the deals that we had with the major filler and toxin providing companies, and also coming into. I mean, it's all. I mean, I shouldn't lay all the accolades at his feet. It was also that we branched into research in a hard way, and that's become quite successful at the practice. And we
clinical trials.
Yeah, clinical trials. I managed to run the clinical practice and have several trials going on at once, and that's been good because and that's the problem with clinical trials, right? It's a catch-22. On the one hand, you can't, if you don't have the trials, you don't want to spend the money on salaries to hire the people that would be there for the trials. But on the other hand, you can't get the trials if you don't have the people that can handle the trial. And so finally we got into the situation where we have the people and we have the trials, and it's all working out pretty good. But that took several years to actually implement.
For sure, because I've known quite a few who have tried to pull that off, and many haven't been able to. Yeah.
Very, very difficult. And interestingly enough, once again, the key is staff. With my CEO, COO, I hired a head of research who was very talented, very good, and she managed to really make this work. And that's been great. So it's those two key positions that have really revolutionized my practice.
Nice. And just one last business question. Just give me one of your biggest mistakes that you learned from and others could avoid, hopefully.
Ooh, there's so many. It's hard
I
to
know.
choose.
Just pick one.
I mean,
Give me a
I
good
think.
one.
The easiest thing that comes to mind, of course, is hiring the wrong person at that position, right? I mean, that's the biggest mistake. That's the biggest mistake I've made. But otherwise, doing things that detract from the main core competency of the business and of the practice, right? And so I was just recently tried to buy a building, and I didn't have the infrastructure to be able to process that kind of decision well. And that was a large waste of time, and it didn't work out, and it was a big mess. But so it's getting away from the core competency of the practice. So trying to buy lasers you don't need, trying to look into maybe I should buy a building when you're not you don't have the people there to help you really manage that decision effectively, that kind of thing. That's really, kind of becomes a waste of time.
Okay, now let's shift gears and talk about marketing. I can't figure out who your demographics are, or do you have preferred patients? Because you do offer an awful lot of solutions for an awful lot of people. So how are you targeting?
We're online, right? And so by being online, it used to be that by being online, you're automatically targeting a younger demographic. Now we're on social media more than anything else. And so with social media, I'm targeting a younger demographic. I mean, for my procedure for the nose, that's a younger demographic by definition. And so I want to be on social media no matter what. And because that's the procedure because that's the signature procedure of the practice, then I certainly need to have a big presence, on social media in general. So my practice skews, across. It skews younger, but it does I try to capture, all demographics, but I like skewing younger. And I'm in the city, I'm in LA, and a place where there's locally, there's a large demographic of younger people who are beauty conscious. And so that works.
Your website looks fantastic, and it looks like it's attracting, I would say, not the 20-year-olds. It's probably the older people. But your Instagram is doing a great job attracting probably the younger people. Yeah. In today's world, I would think you could almost live off of, if you only pick 2 marketing channels, I would say get your website straight, get your SEO straight, and then just embrace Instagram. Just embrace it. You can't. Yeah. Anyone who thinks that they can live without social media in today's world, I think, is deluding themselves, because people really. If you think like a cosmetic patient, what's the first thing they say? Like, who are you? Yeah. Who are you? Do I connect with you? Do I even like you? Who are your patients? What else? What do I know about you? And by the way, your Instagram, you're doing a kicker job on that Instagram. I think you have 92,000 followers on Instagram. And for anyone who doesn't know Dr. Rivkin, he looks like a super serious guy, right? Well, you have to check him out on Instagram. He has this alter ego. It's dancing. It's funny. I was so surprised. I thought, this is not the doctor I know. But you know what? It comes off very authentic and very funny, like the Kardashian thing where she would poop every day, and that was so creative. Anyway, you have to check out his Instagram. He's doing a killer job on it. So tell me, that also is not happening by accident. I know what it takes to pull that off. So what kind of team do you have making that happen?
I have 2 full-time social media people. Yeah. And again, the reason for that is a hire. I hired a 23-year-old who's great, who's she's Russian like me. Well, she's Belarusian. I'm Ukrainian, but she also is kind of serious, but she is very funny, and she can edit video like nobody else I've seen. She knows the trends. She knows kind of and she's just and she can do it in a way that comes off very authentic to me, because she understands me. and she's very, very funny. And so it's like, so people are like, oh, you're so funny on Instagram.
Right.
Not, she's really funny on Instagram. And fortunately, I can kind of ride along on her tail. But so it works,
And is
so
she
yes.
selecting the music?
Oh yeah.
The music's really, really great too. It's very entertaining.
It's all her. It's all her. And I mean, we talk about ideas, and we talk about, like, of course, if we're going to do certain things, but she's in charge of all this stuff. She does a good job.
How much of your time would you say is spent? How many hours a week would you say you're doing it?
Oh, not very much these days. Not very much, thankfully. Yeah, it would be too crazy if I had to do that. I think, I mean, seriously, like maybe 3 hours in a week. Yeah.
It's quite a few are still spending 3 hours a day. And
I know.
I just don't see how you do that and do what you do for a living.
I think that there's some people that have a very natural talent for this, right? Nyack has a natural talent for it. Subio has a natural talent for it. I don't have a natural talent for it like that. And I think those guys are, and I think people need to understand that you're not those guys. Like,
and don't try to be.
And don't try to be like those guys, because it's gonna kill you. So, and I admire those guys so much for their skill at doing that. So, and I learned from them. I try to learn from them somewhat of what what works and kind of how they do things. But I'm not them, and I don't want to be them.
I mean, Nyack, I don't know how he pulls this off, but he will do he'll do a walk in the park talking about collagen supplements, and he's got 69,000 people that watch that, and I'm thinking, how is that possible? Apparently, amazing. I don't know what's going on out there, but that's amazing.
It's amazing. And I think it's just like he just has a way of connecting with the camera. And that's unbelievable. And I think and kudos to him, because he's also a super nice guy. So I love seeing nice people, really succeed.
But you're absolutely right about, you don't have to be the actor if you've got the right person supporting you. She can make you look really good. You know, she can add the music and the effects and the video editing. So that person, I think, is key in today's cosmetic practice.
Yeah, I think so.
Is there anything else you're doing? Because is PR still a big deal?
That's an interesting question. I think that's a really interesting question. PR, when I first started out, was a really big deal for me. Because I knew that, so my formula, and I had like a little formula in my head, and I figured, okay, I have a practice. I started this practice on the second floor of a hair salon, in Westwood Village. It was
in hopes that they were going to come upstairs.
In hopes that they were going to come upstairs. Those hopes were dashed very very early, because the hairdressers were not interested. And I'm like, dude, I will give you Botox for free. Just send me patients. They're like, oh, I don't know. I'm too busy. Okay. So, but yeah, I had 800 square feet. And so I thought, well, who in their right mind would come to see me, like, in this hair salon? There's like, no, this is crazy. And so, my formula was basically claim real estate online with a website that was better than anybody else's. Get people to the website by driving through, by having good SEO, and taking advantage of sites. Oh, by the way, City Search. Remember City Search?
Yep.
City Search made my practice, because I had a website, and I had a decent website, and City Search crawled my website, and suddenly I was like number one, Botox Los Angeles. It was me. This little 800 square foot office in the second floor of the hair salon. Because I was the best that City Search could find on, as a site. And so have real estate, drive people to the real estate, and then when they get there, provide them, first of all, an experience where it's a good website, but also with indicators of legitimacy. And the indicators of legitimacy are, of course, media. And so that was the formula, and that worked quite well. These days, PR-wise, I think PR is important, but less so because of social media. And I think it's different now, because now it's like influencers and online, but still, I mean, I haven't really had it very much over the last few years. And it hasn't worked super well, except as content for social media.
For sure. And collecting those logos, the PR logos on your website, we still love that. We love the pictures, the little logos. So that's fantastic. Have you had any luck with influencers? I hear spotty things.
Spotty. Very spotty. Yeah. People that you think are going to be like, are really going to make things blow up, don't. And people that are like, you think are like nobodies, send this like stream of patients through the door. And it's hard to predict. You have to be able to, and this is one of the challenges, is you have to be able to look at an influencer's page, see if they're real or not. Like see if their fans are local, see if their fans are loyal, see if their fans follow their you think they're real, like kind of really actually follow the recommendations. And seeing if they're legit and are a good fit for you, I think is really important when you choose influencers, because you can really waste a lot of time, hopefully not money, because hopefully people aren't actually paying influencers to do procedures. But you can waste a lot of time doing that.
I do know a surgeon who, on his patient intake form, he literally says, how many followers do you have on Instagram?
I know people like that too. Yeah. It's not a bad idea. Right. I gotta say, it's not a bad idea.
There's another guy in the Midwest that you wouldn't expect, and he literally has a whole page on influencers. And on his nav bar, it says influencers, and when you go to the landing page, he's literally discussing what he's looking for in an influencer, and then he has them apply. So, yeah.
I mean, it's a whole different. It's interesting. It's so interesting how this world is shifting so quickly. And so it's interesting to keep up with it.
Well, I remember PR because it was so new. Everything was so new. I could call the news stations myself locally. I was in San Francisco, and I could call, and I knew the guys, and I would say, "Hey, what do you think about filler for cheeks or something?"
Yeah.
Like they were like, "What? That's fantastic!"
Yeah.
It was so new, and now what in the world can you possibly say that hasn't been said?
Right, that's true.
So here's what I want to do. I need to talk about you and Ukraine and what you're doing to help that poor country. Now, you're saying you're Ukrainian, but I heard you say you're from Boston. And where's your accent? You don't even have an accent. So what happened?
No, I was not born in your country.
There
it is. I'm from Odessa. I'm from Odessa, Ukraine. I was born there. We came over to Boston in 75. So I grew up in Boston. I was 7 when we came to America. And it used to be, I would just say, I'm a Soviet Jew. But, these days that's changed. And then I used to say, I'm Russian. But no longer do I say that I'm Russian, because it's just not true. It's not something, it's not true. And it's not something I want to be true. I'm Ukrainian, Ukrainian Jewish. And it's been, it's just mind boggling. It's absolutely incomprehensible. And it's such a waste. It's an enormous global waste of so much.
So let's talk about what you've been doing, because it's amazing what one person can do to make a difference.
I just kind of try to do whatever I can. And I think that I try to leverage whatever things in my life I can leverage in order to make whatever difference I can. And so there's a group here that collects stuff and collects, some medical supplies and that kind of thing. And we collected some things and sent over, and that was nice, but it was fairly small scale. A friend of mine from Germany, who was a very prominent researcher and speaker in our field, and she's lovely, Patricia Ogilvy. She contacted me and she said, "Hey, you're from Ukraine. I'm sure you're very much, watching what's going on." She said, "I'm in touch with the Ukrainian medical, the hospitals and the medical teams there, and I work with the medical students here in Germany because it's so close to, everything there. She says it's actually a funny story. She goes, there's things that we have run out of in Europe that I'd like you to see if you have in America and you can ship over. I said, oh yeah, of course, no problem. So we don't have tourniquets. And I thought, and in my mind, I'm picturing the little rubber things that you put on your hand in order to draw blood, right? And I'm like, Europe is running out of tourniquets? That's crazy. So I called up McKesson and I said, hey guys, I need a whole bunch of tourniquets to ship to Ukraine. How many can you get to me, right away? And they're like, we can get you 500,000 tourniquets. I'm like, oh my God, that's so great. I'm like, get it to me right away. They're like, okay. I'm sure they thought I was completely insane. And so I called up Patricia and I said, Patricia, I can get you 500,000 tourniquets. And she said, what? She's like, what do you mean you can give me 500,000? I said, I can get you all this kind of stuff. I can get you so much. They'll be there tomorrow. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah. And it's like, they're like 10 cents a pop. It's totally no big deal. She's like, well, wait. She's like, I think something's lost in translation. So we figured out what she was talking about was tactical tourniquets. And these are like battlefield thing. They've got, so they're very specific piece of equipment that you for major wounds that you cut off blood supply to when you've had like a piercing wound or shrapnel wound or whatever it is. And there's they're not super involved in machinery, but they are a product that's more involved than just a little piece of rubber. So those are so
was McKesson thinking you were talking about that kind of tourniquet? Or
no, so I thought I was talking about the little piece of rubber for blood draws. And I said to McKesson, get me that little piece of rubber. So they sent me this big box of 500,000 things of rubber. And then I talked to Patricia and she's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. Of course we can use a glove for a piece of rubber to draw blood. That's not what we need. Okay. We need something for tactical injuries that it's very specific. And so, yes, I had to send that back. But I was able to find a bunch of those specific things that they needed. And those are life-saving pieces of equipment. So we managed to ship several hundred of those over. And that was really nice. And so I felt like, gosh, that's okay. I'm in a somewhat unique position where I have information from the ground and I can tailor the kinds of supplies that we can send through that information to make sure it's the most important things that they need. And so, but I'm one person. What can I do? And, I'm a fairly big allergen injector. I'm very much involved. I'm involved with the company as a trainer, injector, researcher. I'm a, KOL, and I order a lot of stuff. And I know everybody from top to bottom in the company. And so I contacted, and at some point there's a conference and I was like talking to some of these guys and I'm like, well, what are you guys doing with the Ukraine? Because companies were contributing. And they said, oh, well, we've done all this stuff. Like we've contributed, several million bucks. We've stopped the sale of aesthetic supplies over there. We back anybody within the company that wants to contribute. We match those funds. This is really impressive. This is really impressive what you guys are doing. This is something that really people should hear about because I hadn't heard about that. They're really doing significant kinds of things, not just paying lip service. They're really doing significant things. And I said, that's really impressive. What do you guys think about doing more? Because do you guys want to do something with me? Because they know Patricia so well. She's very involved in the company as well. I'm like, we can figure out what people really need, and then we can maybe you guys can help us really ship a large amounts over. And it was not even it wasn't even a conversation. They were like, you say it, you tell me what you want to go, you tell us what you want to go, and we'll ship it, we'll do it. I'm like, what's my limit? And they're like, we're Allergan. There's no limit. I'm like, okay, let me see what I can do. So finally going back and forth and, trying to find stuff. finally we managed to ship over 15 tons of water treatment equipment over into Nikolaevsk, into Ukraine. Now, and the interesting thing about that is that sounds like it's not like super critical, like they need other medical stuff more, but Russia is using access to water as a weapon. And so they poison wells, they'll cut off water supply to major population centers. And so having that kind of water treatment equipment is critical. So I was very, very pleased that they could, I mean, that's a major undertaking to ship that much stuff over. And they did it without batting an eye. And to their benefit, it's great.
So didn't they charter a 747 and you got to fill it up with as much as you could?
It was more than that. It was more than, I mean, basically, I thought it was a good story. So I sent it to media. And
I saw you. I watch Fox religiously.
Yeah. So I sent, So I was talking to them about it. I'm like, well, how do I kind of, basically what Allergan said is, look, here's our FedEx number. Do it. Right. And so I thought of it, well, how do I make it? So to make an image out of it, I said, look, they're giving me the 747 to fly stuff over. Right. But it's a 747 it's more than what I shipped was more than a 747. I think it was 1.5 of those. So it was fantastic. And then, so now we'll see. I'm trying to do another one. I've located the supplies. I'm trying to figure out how to get them over.
Well, also what was interesting was that because the next question is, well, how do you get them in the right hands? And tell them that, like, you have to go through Poland.
Right. And so that stuff that I have, because it's funny. It's funny how this works, because so here in LA, I know an ophthalmologist who's also Ukrainian, who is doing a lot of work in this space. And so I worked with her to some degree with some fundraisers, and then she connected me to somebody else, and those people are from more major organizations that have infrastructure on the ground, where over there. So as soon as the material hits Poland, they've got the trucks going out. They've got the delivery systems all set up. They know where the places are that need the supplies the most and which supplies should be delivered. So that part is no problem. Those systems are worked out well. So it's worked out. I mean, I'm hoping, whatever I can do, I'm hoping just to do as much as possible.
And if somebody did want to help, isn't there an organization called Hope for Ukraine?
Hope, yeah. So I do a GoFundMe, and then we're using those funds to help, to defray any of the costs that are associated with trying to, send as much as we can. And then also there's the organization, this ophthalmologist that I was talking about has an organization called Hope to Ukraine. So it's Hope and then number 2 Ukraine. And they do quite a bit also, and I'm affiliated with them.
Wow, good for you. Have you been back to Ukraine much since you left after 7?
I went back in 91, and then actually it's funny, Allergan sent me to lecture in 2012.
Wow.
And that was lots of fun. That was interesting to see all these. I don't remember any of it. It's so little. So it was interesting.
Yeah. Do you still have family there, or did everyone move to America?
No, it's all. I don't have family there. But it was. I went. But it was interesting with seeing Odessa. It's a beautiful place. Parks and cafes, and I mean, it's a nice place. I want it to stay that way.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on, and kudos to your work. Both in business and in philanthropic. Congratulations on that. If anybody wants to learn any more about Dr. Rivkin, his website is westsideaesthetics.com. right? Why is it called westsideaesthetics.com and not rivkinaesthetics.com?
It is now called the branding now. I switched to Rivkin Aesthetics.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
But there was a point to that where I wanted it to be not just about me. So it's interesting, and that's a point that people, I think, have to think about. Do you want it to be just about you? Because it's easier if it's just about you, but then it's harder for your extenders if it's just about you. So then it's so now I've switched to Rivkin Aesthetics, where I know that under Rivkin Aesthetics, I can still have those sub brands that work well.
Absolutely, because frankly, in social media today, though, it's got to go with you. It's got to be your name. It's so difficult. I get thinking long term and like, how do you pass this off if your name's all over it? But Charles Schwab did it, so you just have to think like, are you going to think short term, long term? But there are pros and cons to all of it. But anyway. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. Everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us today. If you've got any questions for me or feedback for Dr. Rifkin, please leave them on my website at catherinemaley.com, or you can certainly DM me at Catherine Maley MBA. And for that, we'll wrap it up and take care. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.